Welcome back to the Synapse and the Stoa. I'm your host, John Sampson. On this show, we look at the toughest challenges of being human through three specific lenses: the wisdom of ancient philosophy, the insights of modern psychology, and the hard data of neuroscience. We're looking for practical solutions that actually work in the real world. Today, we're talking about a weight that too many of us, and especially a lot of men, are carrying. It's a weight that sits in your chest when you wake up and follows you into your dreams at night. I'm talking about resentment. I want you to think about the Greek myth of Sisyphus. You know the story. He was condemned by the gods to push a massive boulder up a hill, only to have it roll back down the moment he reached the top, for eternity. But here's the thing. Most of us are living that myth right now. The only difference is that our boulder isn't made of stone. It's made of the things we can't let go of. It's made of that ex-partner who lied to you, the boss who passed you over for a promotion, or the friend who disappeared when things got hard. Every time you ruminate on those wrongs, every time you replay the argument in your head, you are pushing that boulder up the hill. And every time you feel that surge of bitterness, that boulder rolls back down and you start all over again. Holding on to resentment is sentencing yourself to a life like Sisyphus. You're working yourself to exhaustion, but you aren't actually moving forward. You're just repeating the same cycle of pain. Your boulder is made up of all those things you can't move past. The people who wronged you, the things that didn't go your way. In this episode, we're going to learn how to drop the boulder. We're going to look at why your brain keeps you trapped in these anger loops, and how the Stoics and the Greeks viewed forgiveness as a tool for power, not weakness. We're going to prove that forgiveness isn't about being okay with what happened. It's about refusing to let those actions control your mental well-being any longer. Because trying to move on with your life while carrying all that resentment will prevent you from ever being free. That weight will forever be a burden. Before we get into the science and the soul of letting go, I want to ask you one small favor. Hit that subscribe or follow button right now. It's free and it helps us reach more people so that they can benefit from the topics we discuss here. All right, let's dive in. Before we can stop resentment, we have to look it in the eye. We have to define it, not as a vague emotion, but as a specific psychological state. In clinical psychology, they call it unforgiveness. Most people think of unforgiveness as a passive state, just not having forgiven yet. But the research tells us a different story. Unforgiveness is an active, enduring state. It's characterized by persistent negative emotions like resentment, bitterness, and hostility. It's a chronic stress response that you're keeping on high long after whatever the initial threat was has passed. Why is it so hard to let go? It's because of a process called rumination. In psychology, rumination is the repetitive, intrusive focusing on the causes and consequences of an injury. It's the anger loop. You're lying in bed at 2 a.m. and you're replaying the moment she lied to you, or the moment your colleague took credit for your work. You're rehearsing what you should have said. You're feeling that same spike of heat in your chest. But when you ruminate, you are keeping the initial trauma active in your psyche. You aren't letting the stress response decay naturally. From a clinical perspective, you are entering a maladaptive thinking pattern that prevents emotional regulation. you are effectively keeping that wound open and continuously pouring salt in it yourself. Trying to move on with your life while carrying all of that rumination is like trying to run a marathon with a backpack full of lead. It prevents you from ever being free. By the way, this isn't just all in your head. Your body is keeping the score of the impact to your health. When you're stuck in a state of resentment, your brain signals your HPA axis to dump stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline into your system. This is great if you're being chased by a predator. It's catastrophic if you're just sitting on your couch thinking about your ex-wife. Chronic unforgiveness acts as a potent, persistent stressor. It leads to what scientists call allostatic load, the literal wear and tear on the body that accumulates when you are exposed to repeated or chronic stress. Data from research studies shows chronic resentment is a predictor of high blood pressure and heart disease. You're literally hardening your arteries over a grudge. High cortisol levels suppress your immune system, making you more susceptible to everything from the common cold to chronic pain. And there is a direct correlation between unforgiveness and clinical depression and generalized anxiety. So when I say that holding on to resentment only hurts you, I'm talking about your literal heart, your blood, and your brain. You are sentencing yourself to a shorter, more painful life because of someone else's mistakes. Does that sound like winning to you? The biggest barrier with a lot of people is a fundamental misunderstanding of what forgiveness is. They think forgiveness is weak. They think it means saying, it's okay that you did that. Let me be really clear. Getting rid of resentment doesn't mean that you're okay with what happened. It doesn't mean the other person was right. And it doesn't mean you have to invite them back into your life. As psychology tells us, forgiveness is a unilateral decision. Reconciliation is a two-way street that requires trust. Forgiveness is a one-way street that requires only your will. Forgiveness is about control. It's about deciding that you will no longer allow those actions to control your mental well-being. When you hold on to resentment, you're letting the person who hurt you live rent-free in your head and continue to hurt you over and over and over. Don't let your stubbornness and unwillingness to forgive perpetually hold you back from the life that you want. Your stubbornness isn't a shield. It's the chain that keeps you tethered to the person you hate. So how did the ancients handle this? For the ancient Greeks, the goal wasn't just to be nice. The goal was the health of the soul, the psyche. They didn't see resentment as a justified emotional reaction. They saw it as a spiritual infection that clouded your judgment and ruined your life. Plato argued that no one does wrong willingly. He believed that every human being, at their core, desires what is good. If someone wrongs you, Plato suggests it's because of a cognitive failure. They are literally ignorant of what is actually good for them. Think of it as a medical model of justice. If you see someone with a broken leg, you don't get angry at them for limping. Plato viewed the wrongdoer the same way. Their soul is in a state of disorder. They are sick. When you look at that person who betrayed you through this lens, the resentment starts to evaporate. You realize that by acting the way they did, they have done more damage to their own soul than they could ever do to you. Wishing ill upon others won't bring you success. It just keeps you tethered to their sickness. Aristotle adds another layer with the concept of equity. He believed that being a man of the high soul meant you didn't always insist on your strict legal rights. Aristotle's solution was equity, the ability to look at the whole person and the intent behind the action. Were they really trying to hurt you? Or were they just ignorant of their actions and the consequences? When you carry the boulder of resentment, you are refusing to be equitable. You are demanding a debt be paid that likely can't be paid. Now we move to the Stoics. Seneca, in his work on anger, called resentment a short madness. He described it as a shocking picture of self-perversion where your eyes blaze and your blood boils. Seneca's argument for dropping the boulder of resentment was a cold, hard, rational calculation. My anger is more likely to do me more harm than you're wrong. The original injury might have happened once, but your anger about it is what's happening right now. It's affecting your heart rate and your focus. Think about that. You're angry because someone did you wrong, but by staying angry, you are inflicting a second harm on yourself, one that is often much worse than the original insult. Seneca believed that since anger is unwilling to be controlled, the only safe move is to destroy it entirely. Then you have Epictetus, who was born a slave and later became a world-renowned teacher. He taught that forgiveness is actually a realization that you weren't actually injured in the way that you think you were. He taught that the only true good is your virtue, and the only true evil is your own vice. So an external person cannot injure your moral character unless you let them. If someone insults you, they haven't actually harmed the real you, your rational mind. They've only made a noise. The injury only exists because you judged it to be an injury. He had a famous analogy. Everything has two handles. One handle is the wrong done to me, and the other is, this is a human being. If you try to pick up the situation by the wrong done to me handle, it will be too heavy to carry. But if you pick it up by the other handle, the one of common humanity, you can bear it. This is the philosophical precursor to Viktor Frankl's space between stimulus and response. As Epictetus would say, you get to choose how you respond. You can let it define and destroy you, or you can accept the reality and move on. And finally, Marcus Aurelius reminds us that we are all part of a common mind. To stay angry at someone is like your left hand being angry at your right hand. He famously said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." When you hold on to resentment, you are becoming a mirror of the person you hate. You are letting their ugliness dictate your internal state. Getting rid of resentment doesn't mean you're okay with what happened. It's about refusing to let their actions control your mental well-being. It's about choosing to remain beautiful in character, even when others are ugly. Now, let's look under the hood. What is actually happening in your brain when you decide to forgive? Forgiveness isn't just a change of heart. It's a meaningful, physiological reorganization. When you choose to forgive, you are activating a very specific network of brain regions involved in theory of mind, empathy, and top-down cognitive regulation. The primary engine of forgiveness is your prefrontal cortex, and specifically the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain responsible for the executive function and inhibiting impulsive behavior. When you engage in reappraisal-driven forgiveness, where you reevaluate the event or the perpetrator's intentions, you are firing up this area of the prefrontal cortex. This top-down regulation allows your smart brain to override your limbic system's immediate fight or flight response. Research shows that people with larger volumes in this area of the brain tend to have higher forgiveness scores and lower levels of anxiety. In other words, the more you practice forgiveness, the more you are actually building the muscle of your emotional health. Forgiveness also requires you to understand the mental state of another person. This is called mentalizing, or theory of mind. When you activate this network in your brain, you can start to see that the offender's actions might have been influenced by their own trauma, stress, or external circumstances. This doesn't make what they did right, but it makes you feel less personally targeted. It differentiates between accidental and intentional harm in your brain, which can then help you more easily come to terms with forgiveness. On the flip side, when you are stuck in resentment, your amygdala, your brain's threat detector, is chronically activated. It's replaying the injustice in a damaging mental loop. Forgiveness acts to downregulate that amygdala activation. It restores emotional balance. It's like hitting the reset button on your nervous system. And then there's oxytocin. We often call it the bonding hormone. But in the context of forgiveness, it's an antidote to the fight, flight, freeze response. It increases trust and decreases fear. When you move toward forgiveness, you are actually changing the neurochemical cocktail in your bloodstream from one of stress, cortisol, to one of connection, oxytocin. All right, so I promised you tools. We've talked about the why. Now let's talk about the how. How do we actually stop being Sisyphus? Here are 5 practical steps you can start using today to overcome resentment. 1, identify the boulder. You can't drop what you aren't aware you're carrying. Spend 10 minutes tonight writing down who you are resentful toward. Don't censor it. Is it your dad? An old boss? Yourself? Next to each name, write down what it's costing you. Is it keeping you from sleeping? Is it making you cynical in your current relationship? Acknowledge that your stubbornness and unwillingness to forgive is what is actually holding you back from the life you want. 2, the 10-second space, or the Frankl maneuver. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, is a giant in this field. He suffered the unimaginable, yet he refused to hold on to resentment. He said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. When you feel that surge of resentment, that stimulus, stop, breathe, find that 10-second space. In that space, remind yourself, I am choosing my response right now. I can choose the boulder, or I can choose my freedom. 3, the medical reframe. Use Plato's trick. When you think of the person who wronged you, instead of seeing a villain, try to see a diseased soul. Ask yourself, what kind of internal chaos or ignorance must this person be living in to act that way? Wishing ill upon others will not bring you happiness or success. It just keeps you sick. Pitying them, as strange as it sounds, is a way of detaching your value from their actions. Step 4, Decisional versus emotional forgiveness. Psychology tells us there are two stages. Decisional forgiveness. This is a behavioral intention. You decide right now, I will no longer seek revenge or dwell on this. It's a cognitive commitment. And then emotional forgiveness. This is the hard part. Replacing negative emotions with positive ones. Start with the decision. The emotions usually take time to catch up. Don't wait until you feel like forgiving. Make the decision first, and the synapse, your brain, will eventually follow the Stoa, your will. And step 5, cognitive reappraisal. Challenge the judgment of injury. As the Stoics taught, ask, has this person actually harmed my character? Have they made me a less virtuous person? Usually the answer is no. They've harmed your ego, your wallet, or your plans, but they haven't touched your ability to choose your own path. Reevaluate the event. See it as a test of your resilience rather than a tragedy that defines you. We're coming to the end of our show. I want to leave you with one final thought. Bad, sometimes awful things will happen to you in life. That is unfortunately not avoidable. Life is going to throw obstacles in your path, but you get to choose how you respond to it. You can let it define and destroy you, or you can choose to accept the reality of the situation and move on. Getting rid of resentment doesn't mean that you're okay with what happened. It's about allowing yourself to move on from the situation so that you're not controlled by it. You are not a victim of the past unless you choose to stay in that anger loop. You have the prefrontal cortex to regulate your emotions, the philosophy to guide your logic, and the examples of men like Viktor Frankl to show you it's possible. Drop the boulder. Walk up the hill without the weight. That is where your growth and your freedom are waiting. Thanks for listening to the Synapse and the Stoa. I'm John Sampson. Go out there and reclaim your headspace. Be sure to head to our website, synapseandstoa.com, to get our show notes for this and all of our episodes. And if you're interested in early access to new episodes, providing topics you'd like me to explore in future episodes, or connecting with me directly, be sure to check us out on Patreon.